What if the people cheering loudest for you today are secretly hoping you never make it? Most people assume that when they grow, when they level up, when they start becoming who they were always meant to be, the people around them will celebrate. They think loyalty is automatic. They think love means people want the best for you. But the disturbing truth is this: the moment you start winning, you will discover who was never really in your corner. Not through arguments, not through betrayal in the dramatic sense, but through silence, through slow disappearance, through the subtle coldness that creeps into conversations that used to feel warm. And here's what most people miss: they blame themselves. They wonder what they did wrong. They shrink back, trying to make others comfortable again. But Friedrich Nietzsche saw this centuries ago. He wrote that the higher you climb, the fewer people can breathe the air. Not because the air is thin, but because most people never intended to climb at all. This isn't a video about cutting people off. This is a video about understanding one of the most painful, misunderstood, and psychologically complex truths about human nature: why the people closest to you sometimes become the first to quietly walk away when you start rising. In this video, we'll uncover 7 hidden psychological reasons why fake friends disappear when you start winning, and what it reveals about them, about you, and about the nature of real connection. Section 1: Your growth becomes their mirror. The first reason is the one nobody wants to admit. When you start improving, when you go to the gym consistently, when you start that business, when you stop drinking, when you get serious about your goals, something uncomfortable happens to the people around. Most people think that a friend's progress is just their friend's progress. Separate, neutral, nothing to do with them. But the human mind doesn't work that way. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the unconscious part of us that holds everything we've buried, denied, or refused to face about ourselves. And when they watch you doing the very thing they told themselves they could, your success doesn't just inspire them. It confronts them. It holds up a mirror they didn't ask to look into. Your discipline exposes their excuses. Your consistency exposes their inconsistency. Your courage exposes their fear. And rather than face what the mirror shows them, they find it easier to step away from the mirror entirely. This is why some people become subtly hostile toward your progress, why they make jokes about your ambition, why they call you obsessed, when really they mean, "I wish I had what you have." The memorable truth here is this: when someone mocks your growth, they are confessing their own stagnation. Section 2: Your success disrupts the social order. Every group of people, every friend circle, every family unit, every workplace operates like an invisible ecosystem. There is a social order, roles, hierarchies, expectations. You were placed in a role. Maybe the funny one, maybe the loyal one, maybe the one who never quite had their life together. And here's what no one tells you: the people around you often need you to stay in that role. Not consciously, they would never admit it. But your place in the group creates a certain comfort. Psychologists call this social homeostasis, the way social groups unconsciously resist change in order to maintain balance. When you start winning, you break the ecosystem. You step outside the role they assigned you. And this feels to them like a kind of betrayal, even though you've done nothing wrong. Think about the family member who subtly undermines every achievement, the friend who used to hype you up, but now barely reacts, the colleague who grows colder as you grow more successful. They aren't evil. They are reacting to the disruption of a social order they depended on. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who was once a slave before becoming one of the most powerful thinkers of antiquity, understood this deeply. He taught that we cannot control how others define us, but we must never allow their definitions to become our limitations. The moment you outgrow the role others cast you in, you will feel resistance. That resistance is not cruelty. It is fear. Section 3, proximity to pain here, is a truth that sounds almost cruel when you first hear it. Some people are only friends with you because of what you share, not experiences, not values. Pain, shared struggle, creates a powerful bond. When two people are both lost, both broke, both heartbroken, both confused, there is deep comfort in that shared experience. You understand each other. You don't have to explain yourselves. The misery is mutual, and that mutuality feels like intimacy. But what happens when one person starts to heal? When one person starts to figure it out, the bond begins to erode. Not because love wasn't real, but because the foundation was built on shared suffering rather than shared vision. Nietzsche described this as the friendship of pity relationships that exist not out of genuine admiration or deep respect, but out of mutual weakness. And he warned that such friendships cannot survive one person becoming strong. So if you've started healing old wounds, building something meaningful, choosing yourself, and you notice certain people drifting, it may not be because you changed for the worse. It may be because they were only close to the version of you who was still broken. Some connections are held together not by love, but by mutual limitation. And when you remove the limitation, you reveal the love was never quite. Section 4, envy wears the face of support. This one is the most dangerous because it is the most invisible. Envy does not look like what you think it looks like. It doesn't show up as hostility, or insults, or open competition. In most cases, envy wears a mask. It shows up as lukewarm enthusiasm, as oh, that's cool when it should be, that's incredible, as advice that subtly undermines, as questions that plant doubt. Schopenhauer wrote that envy is the most universal of human emotions, that almost no one is truly immune to it, because it is rooted not in malice, but in the unbearable ache of comparison. When someone we consider an equal suddenly surpasses us, the ego experiences it as a personal wound. And here's the cruel irony. The closer the friend, the sharper the envy. A stranger winning doesn't sting. We can cheer for a stranger. We can admire a celebrity. But a friend, a sibling, someone who sat at the same table as you when they start winning, something inside the envious person whispers, "Why not me?" They can't answer that question with grace. So instead, they quietly distance themselves. Or they begin to subtly compete. Or they chip away at your confidence just enough to keep you at a manageable. This is not people being evil. This is people being human. But knowing this protects you. The people who smile the least at your wins often wanted those wins the most. Section 5, identity threat. When you change, you force the people who loved the old you to make a decision they never wanted to make. Many people build their identity partly through their relationships. Who they are is defined by who they are to you. The funny friend, the supportive one, the wiser one, the one who's always there. And if you change, if you become more serious, more ambitious, more disciplined, more spiritual, more self-aware, they have to update not just who you are to them, but who they are in relation to you. That is a psychological burden most people will not consciously take. Marcus Aurelius, writing to himself in Meditations, noted something profound, that people react most violently not to what others do, but to what others represent. Your growth represents something to them about themselves they are not yet ready to face. The friend you outgrew wasn't destroyed by your success. They were confronted by the possibility of their own and chose retreat over transfer. Your evolution is not a rejection of them, but they will often experience it that way, and that is a wound only they can choose to heal. Section 6, conditional love. Not every person who loves you unconditionally. This sounds harsh. It is simply true. Some love is transactional at its core. It says, "I love you when you make me feel comfortable, when you don't threaten my sense of, when you stay in a place where I can easily understand you." The Stoics had a concept called amor fati, love of fate. The ability to embrace what is, without demanding it be different. Real love, in its deepest form, carries this quality. It grows with the person it loves. It celebrates the evolution. Conditional love cannot do. Conditional love needs you to stay the same because it is built on a version of you that no longer exists. And so when you change, when you choose growth over comfort, discipline over drift, conditional love begins to feel threatened. And threatened things either fight or flee. Most fake friends don't fight. They simply fade. What leaves when you start winning was never really staying. It was staying for the version of you that made someone else feel safe. Section 7, the law of resonance, the final reason, is the most philosophical and perhaps the most liberating. Energy seeks its match. When you are vibrating at a certain frequency, complacency, complaint, passivity, fear, you naturally attract and retain people who operate at that same frequency, not because you are bad, but because it is simply resonance. Like finds like. But the moment you begin to shift, the moment you raise your standards, your discipline, your self-respect, the resonance breaks. And those who cannot match your new frequency will, without a conscious decision being made, drift toward people and places that feel more familiar to them. This is not abandonment. It is physical. And here is the liberating truth that Nietzsche pointed to when he wrote about the Bermensch, the person who becomes what they are, fully, without apology. As old connections dissolve, new ones become possible. Deeper ones, real ones. People who see you not for who you were, but for who you are becoming. The disappearance of fake friends is not a loss. It is a selection, nature's way of clearing space for what belongs in your next chapter. The psychology behind this: why does success repel certain people at a psychological level? At the root of all of it is the ego and its relationship to fear. The ego is not bad. It is the mind's mechanism for survival, for identity, for orientation in the world. But the ego is deeply threatened by comparison, especially upward comparison. When someone we consider our peer suddenly surpasses us, the ego interprets this not as an external event, but as a judgment of our own worth. This is why psychologists call it social comparison theory, the idea that human beings constantly evaluate their own abilities and worth not in absolute terms, but relative to the people around them. And when that relative position shifts, the emotional fallout, shame surfaces, inadequacy surfaces. And because most people have not done the inner work to sit with those feelings without acting on them, they externalize the discomfort. They project it. They distance themselves from the source of their discomfort, which is you. Add to this the architecture of modern insecurity, built on emotional wounds from childhood, from years of being told that wanting more is arrogance, and you begin to understand why growth is socially dangerous in certain circles. None of this excuses the behavior, but understanding it removes the sting. It stops being personal. It becomes psychological. And what is psychological can be understood, and what is understood can no longer control. How to respond when this happens, and it will happen here, is how the emotionally intelligent person responds. First, stay silent about your growth around people who have not demonstrated they can celebrate it. Not everything you are building needs to be announced. Privacy is power. Second, stop seeking validation from people whose opinion of you is rooted in who you used to be. They cannot see you. You are not asking them to. You are simply learning not to require it. Third, grieve what leaves without poisoning what remains. Some connections were real, even if they were temporary. Honor what they were. Release what they can no longer be. Fourth, invest deeply in the relationships that grow with you. Find people who are not threatened by your ambition, but ignited by it. Your growth will make you findable to them. And fifth, above all, continue becoming. The greatest response to those who doubt you is not confrontation. It is transformation. Keep going. Let the work speak. Why this matters more today: we are living in the age of radical visibility. Social media has turned every personal milestone into a public event. Every promotion, every before and after, every success is broadcast and received in real time by people who are simultaneously running their own race and measuring it against yours. The comparison culture this creates is psychologically unprecedented. Human beings were not designed to compare themselves to hundreds of people simultaneously. We were built for small tribes. Now, we carry thousands in our pockets. This amplifies everything. The envy is sharper. The insecurity is more chronic. The need to maintain social hierarchy is more desperate. And so the pattern of fake friends disappearing in the face of success has become not just common, but near universal. Understanding this does not make it painless, but it makes it legible. And in a world designed to make you feel confused and alone, understanding is a form of power. The ending here is what you need to understand about your story. The people who leave when you start winning are not villains. They are people who were not yet ready to face the version of themselves your success demanded they become. That is their journey, not your burden. You did not lose friends. You gained clarity. You now know who is with you for the long. You now know which relationships were built on solid ground and which were built on the comfortable quicksand of shared stagnation. And this knowledge, painful as it arrived, is a gift. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." The loss of false connection is not an obstacle to your growth. It is your growth. It is proof that you have moved. Proof that you are no longer who you were. And it is the clearing of space for something rarer, truer, and more worthy of the person you are becoming. So let them go. Without anger, without bitterness, with the calm authority of someone who finally understands the game. And then, keep building. Not for them, not to prove, but because the life you are creating deserves a version of you that is no longer willing to shrink in order to make others comfortable. As Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." You have a why. Walk toward it.